Dear friends, welcome to the seminar. This is an introduction and presented by our pastor Vasiliy Savchak. The seminar will be split into several parts based on the chapters of the book of Revelation. Please continue to follow us, subscribe, leave comments and questions below. Hope you find this information useful. God bless. So the seminar is split into three parts. The first part is about who is the beast, where will he come from, how and from what country. Will we be able to discover his appearance? These questions are mostly covered in chapters 17 and 13. I will not use my own interpretations, but rather the answers of the angel. Interpretations consider possible variations. I will be showing the answers that the angel gave in the text, and we will look over them together. We will assemble them as a puzzle. So the book of Revelation was given to John by who? By Christ? No. By God? No. It is truly interesting, isn't it? Let's open the first verse and read. Who gave the revelation to John, and from who did he receive the revelation? The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave unto him to show unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass. And he sent and signified it by his angel unto his servant John. So from whom did John receive the revelation? From an angel. Let's trace this chain in the text. God gave to Jesus, Jesus gave to the angel, and the angel gave to John. And he came out as an interpreter of the images that he was showing to him. This is a very important detail in understanding the book. You must search for the answers that the angel gave. He came with that specific purpose. So the book of Revelation can be divided into 7 distinct parts. They aren't even connected that much to each other. The first part is chapter 1, Introduction and the Purpose of the book. It is an informative chapter that shows how Revelation reached us and how Christ interacts with his church. The second part is chapter 2 and 3, letters to the 7 churches in Asia, where Jesus gives an evaluation of the existing churches at that time. And why? I think that today any church that wants to get an evaluation from Christ can compare their position with one or more of these 7 churches. And also each person can personally compare their position as well. The third part is chapter 4 and 5, around God's throne. God for the first time brings a person into his presence, or in other words, invites him as a guest into his house, into his home. John comes to heaven, to the throne of God, and he sees unusual things and creatures there. We will touch on those a bit later. The fourth part is the most important, the chapters 6 to 19, the Great Tribulation and the Second Coming of Christ. As I said, these are the most important chapters. This part contains the prophetic word concerning the last 3.5 years before the second coming of our Lord. This information is located here, and we will mainly focus on this part in the seminar. The fifth part is chapter 20, 1,000-year kingdom of Christ on earth. Even though this chapter is short, but it captures the 1,000-year period of life after the coming of Christ. That is, after the second coming, the life on earth will continue for another 1,000 years. The sixth part is chapter 21, the New Jerusalem. God is showing us how he designed the New Jerusalem. It is a stunning structure, 1,600 kilometers in height, width and length. This structure is incomprehensible. The distance to California is almost the same as the height of this structure. Most of the materials of that city is gold and glass. It's truly magnificent. The last part is chapter 22, part 7. It's about New Earth, and one other interesting thing. I use it in most of my seminars, mainly for myself. Because in this chapter, there's a serious warning to those who explain the book of Revelation. And I fit into that category, and I read these words all the time. Let's read. I testify to everyone who hears the words of the prophecy of this book. If anyone adds to them, God will add to him the plagues which are written in this book. And if anyone takes away from the words of this book, of this prophecy, God will take away his part from the tree of life and from the holy city, which are written in this book. So I sign on the dotted line, so to speak. I have been warned of the liability. He who adds or takes away from the words of this book will have great consequences. This statement only applies to the book of Revelation. So in the book of Revelation, in the fourth part, that is, there are specific characters. So let's go and get to know them a little bit better. Most of it is devoted to the so-called beast. The two full chapters, 13 and 17, tell us about the beast. Who he is, we will learn just a little bit later. And the verse 2 of chapter 6 is also about him. But those chapters are almost completely devoted to him. Then there are three characters of a woman. One is in chapter 12 and two in chapter 17. That is 17:1 and 17:3. And then in chapters 7 and 14 we find 144,000 converted people from the 12 tribes. And then in the 11th chapter, the service of the two prophets. That is particularly all the main characters in the part 4. I would also like to point out that the book of Revelation cannot be regarded as a completely chronological book. The events are not following one another. To understand this better, I give the following example. Let's say in your city, in one day, there were 4 separate events in different parts of the city. For example, in the west side, a boy was born. Can this happen? Today my 15th grandchild was born. It can happen. In another part of the city there was a soccer match. Can that happen? Yes, of course. In the north side there was a wedding. Is this possible? Yes. And on the south side there was a funeral. So these events happened on the same day in different parts. Then you were asked to write about them in detail. Most likely, you would start with a better and more pleasant event, the wedding. You would describe all of the details, the groom, the bride, what age, how they were dressed, what they were driving, and so on. All of the many details. Then you would write about a birth of a child with all the details, boy or girl, weight, height, hair, eyes, and so on. Then you would go on to write about a soccer match. Who played, who won, who lost, and so on. And lastly, the funeral. You would also have to describe all the details of a death of a person. Then you put this in a journal somewhere on a bookshelf, and after 100 years, your great-great-grandchild finds it and reads it. In city of Tacoma, a young couple got married. After 9 months, they had a baby, a boy. This boy grew up and played for a local soccer team. He lived to the age of 80 and then he died. Almost 100% I guarantee you that it would be read like that. Why? Because these events in the description follow one after the other. And that's how they would imagine it. Unfortunately, many people and commentators who explain the book of Revelation follow that same logic. In Revelation, the events that are described happen in about same period of time, but in different parts of the world. That is why, despite the fact that they go one after the other, they occur at the same time, in the same period of time. One event happens in the northern part, another event happens in Jerusalem, and then another in somewhere else in another country, the country that is located amidst the waters. That is why it cannot be viewed completely chronologically. Another detail. The book of Revelation cannot be understood verse by verse. It cannot be read like you would read, for example, the Gospel of Matthew. To explain this, I give an example. This example is located in South America, particularly in Peru. There is a Nazca desert. Anybody heard about it? It's a very interesting place. Very interesting place on a mountain plateau, around 100 kilometers in diameter. The rain falls there only once per year. That is why it is very unique. Even though behind the mountains there's an ocean, but only once a year it gets a rainfall. It looks like this. I will be using this pointer only on this screen, so you can look on both screens, but I will only be showing on this one. So it is surrounded by mountains, this plateau. And there, in 1553, unusual things were first discovered. These kind of pathways. There are many of them. The whole surface of the desert is covered with this gravel. Nothing grows there because there's practically no rain. There are only rocks and some kind of a sand. Obviously, these paths are created by humans. But by whom and why, no one knew. The closest point of civilization is 400 kilometers from there. Almost 400 years. This desert left many questions for the researchers. The mystery of these pathways remained, but in the year of 1947, an American researcher, Paul Cossack, was flying over the Nazca Desert and discovered strange lines and figures that are impossible to see from the ground. Let's look at them from the air, at these pathways. What do you see? This is a spider. This spider lives about 1,000 kilometers away from this place and has a foot like this. This is the only place which this spider can be found, over 1,000 kilometers from Nazca Desert. These pathways that are arranged from the ground, out of the granite, make up a spider from the air. In other words, you can see it only from the air because the images are huge, more than 200 meters in diameter. It is impossible to see them from the ground. You can only see these gravel pathways from the ground, but from the sky, the clear figure of a spider. So the book of Revelation, as well, cannot be viewed from this so-called the ground method, quote-unquote, meaning verse by verse. It must be looked from the bird's eye view, and only then it opens up its contents. This is the key to studying the book of Revelation. I have brought up this example only to show why it cannot be looked at it verse by verse. The fact of the matter is that we read it 7 times over many years helped us. We then formed a broad view of the book, and it helped us see so many things that we could not see verse by verse. It bothered me, how had I not seen them before? I have read this book multiple times before and I did not see the obvious things. That's how they are hidden by God. I say the book of Revelation is not for the curious, but for those who seriously want to understand the truth. First of all, to those who pray to God about it and then dig and compare and analyze. To those, the truth will be revealed.